purpose does the gentlewoman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Ms. Loretta Sanchez of California, page 11, line 21. After the dollar amount, insert reduced by $40 million, increased by $40 million. Page 13, line 24. After the dollar amount, insert reduced by $40 million.
Gentlewoman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, my amendment is simple. Let us combat human trafficking and child exploitation. My amendment would take $40 million from detention and removal operations and transfer those funds to the Office of Investigations to support anti-child exploitation and trafficking initiatives. ICE is one of the key global partners aimed at dismantling criminal infrastructure engaged in child exploitation. These special agents are in many countries throughout the world and the United States, and I have had the opportunity to meet with them overseas where child exploitation is rampant, such as Thailand and Cambodia. That is why I would like to increase funding to combat child exploitation, and I am requesting $40 million be transferred to that. The funds are coming from an account that is $70 million over the President's budget. I didn't even take all of that excess. I'm just asking for $40 million, leaving roughly $30 million for the President's budget in ICE detention and removal operations, with women and girls accounting for over 80% of the people trafficked throughout the world, including within the United States. This issue is something that is very close to my heart, and I have been a vocal advocate to stop and combat sex exploitation trafficking. My district represents the largest Vietnamese population outside of Vietnam in the world, and the fact is that much of this human trafficking victims are originating from Asia. I have a responsibility to the people that I represent to seek out ways to ensure that ICE can combat child exploitation globally, since it impacts us locally. In fact, in Cambodia, brothel owners pay traffickers from anywhere between $350 to $450 for each attractive Vietnamese virgin 16 years or younger. Non-virgins, or those considered less beautiful, are trafficked for about $150 apiece. I'm asking the chairman to join me in this outrage that these things still happen in our modern world, and more often than not, they occur in our own districts here in the United States. The only way to eradicate child exploitation is to stand together to protect every child's right to be free from victimization. We can all work towards eliminating child exploitation by ensuring that we have people who combat this, and by putting this money into this account. We need to give those people on the front line the tools to stop this. I thank the chairman for the time, and I ask him to support my amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentle lady yields back the balance of her time. For what purpose the gentleman from Alabama seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I rise in opposition to the gentlelady's amendment. The concern is the amendment seeks to gut the detention operations just as the administration have tried to do, whereas the bill holds the administration's feet to the fire and provides the resources to force them to actually enforce the law. The committee recommends $2.75 billion for ICE detention and removal operations, $71 million above the request to sustain a minimum of 34,000 detention beds. Detention beds are a necessary resource to support robust immigration enforcement. And make no mistake, there is a need for these resources. First, by the administration's own estimates, there are at least 1.9 million removable criminal aliens in the United States. There is a general acknowledgement that an illegal alien population of approximately 11 million. With the expansion of secure communities and ICE prior utilization, there is no doubt they need at least 34,000 beds. Despite the fact that Congress has funded every request that ICE has provided for bed spaces, we got excuses they did not have the resources needed. Now the resources are being provided, and the committee insists that ICE intensify its enforcement efforts and fully utilize these resources. Let me say that countering child exploitation is a critical effort in this bill, where we already have provided increases for ICE and Secret Service activities. The Wasserman Schultz amendment, which will be brought up shortly, provides an additional 25% for the Child Exploitation Center. We have been working with Congresswoman Wasserman Schultz on this amendment. We are accepting that 25% increase for the Child Exploitation Center, so I would urge my colleagues to oppose this amendment, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. What purpose the gentleman from North Carolina?
Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last words.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I rise in support of our colleague's amendment, the Congresswoman from California, Ms. Sanchez. I think it is a well-designed amendment, both in its positive purpose and in the offsets that she has chosen. She proposes that we increase ICE funding for child exploitation, and that is a worthy cause that we do need to fund more generously than is present in the bill as brought to the floor. Each year, millions of children fall victim to sexual predators. These young victims are left with permanent psychological and physical and emotional scars. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, targets and investigates child pornographers, child sex tourists and facilitators, human smugglers and traffickers of minors, criminal aliens convicted of offenses against minors, and those deported for child exploitation offenses who have returned illegally. ICE is at the forefront of these activities and can make good use of the funding that our colleague proposes. So I commend her for bringing this issue to our attention and for putting this amendment before us. I also have to say that the offsets are particularly well chosen. As I said as we began debate on this bill, this bill contains some ill-advised funding floors, some mandatory spending that is rigid and is wasteful. A certain minimum, an increased minimum of detention beds, for example, and a required floor of funding for the 287G program, a program that is very problematic and that really needs to be transitioned, in my view, to the Secure Communities program that maintains the federal and local roles much more distinctly. So these are offsets that we can afford, and offsets that in fact would improve the bill. And only rarely can one say that about the offsets in these debates. So I commend the gentlelady for her amendment and urge its adoption.
Gentleman yields back. If there is no other speakers, the questions on the amendment offered by the gentlelady from California, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it.
Mr. Chairman, on this I request a recorded vote, please.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentlelady from California will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Nebraska rise?
Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last word.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I wish to enter into a colloquy with Mr. Chairman Adderholt, the Chairman Adderholt from Alabama, the gentleman from Alabama. And first I want to commend his leadership on this transportation or on this appropriations bill concerning the security screenings of children by the Transportation Security Administration. The TSA should absolutely have particular sensitivity in the screening process of children and minimize their distress and discomfort. And I'm very thankful to the gentleman for raising this issue in the manager's amendment and for recognizing this need. But as this process moves forward, I would encourage the chairman to stress the importance of the same sensitivity to the elderly and the infirmed. We have all seen too many images in high-profile news stories about the mistreatment of the elderly and the infirmed, as well as passengers with religious or conscience objections. No good American should be forced to check their modesty at the airport door. Maybe their luggage, but not their modesty. I also appreciate the fact that the report encourages various alternative screening models that would better preserve the civil liberties and privacy of all passengers by moving toward a more risk-based approach, using intelligence more than relying on technology, and encourage the Chairman to continue moving TSA along this path. Would the Chairman be willing to work with me on these issues for the benefit of America's airline passengers?
Would the gentleman yield?
I'll yield to the gentleman.
Oh, yes. I thank the gentleman for his support of the House report language on sensitivity for child passenger screenings. As a parent of an 8-year-old and a 13-year-old, I understand these concerns. It is certainly reasonable to include other vulnerable individuals like the elderly and the infirmed. I would certainly be happy to work with the gentleman going forward on these matters, and I thank him for bringing this to our attention, the challenges of screening to the floor this evening, and look forward to working with him on this matter.
I thank the gentleman from Alabama again for his leadership on the overall appropriations bill here and for his particular sensitivity to this issue. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Florida rise?
Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last word.
Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, first let me just say how much I appreciate the opportunity to work with the Chairman and appreciate his work, both when we work together in the leadership of the Legislative Branch Appropriations Subcommittee, and also to express appreciation for his commitment to increasing the amount of funds available to pursue child exploitation in this bill, and for your commitment in protecting children. Both of us being parents of 8 and 13-year-olds, I have a particular appreciation for this. And I rise to ask for my colleagues' support for an amendment to protect what we've been talking about here this evening, our most vulnerable constituents, our children. My amendment would fence off $20 million in funds through ICE Homeland Security Investigations Cybercrime Center for the purposes of child exploitation prevention and interdiction. There's no question that our children need our support now more than ever. With the proliferation of the Internet and wireless technology, the spread of child pornography online must be addressed aggressively now. We don't have a moment or an opportunity to waste. The Department of Justice estimates that at any moment, more than 1 million pornographic images of children on the Internet, with an additional 200 images being posted every day. And more than 1/3 of the world's pedophiles involved in organized pornography rings worldwide live in the United States. The Internet allows these images to be disseminated indefinitely, victimizing that child victim again and again with each click of the mouse. Because let's not forget that these aren't just heinous images. They are crime scene photos. Every face in those photographs is the face of a child who needs our support in order to escape a living hell of constant abuse and exploitation. Since the 1970s, before we even had a child pornography statute, ICE, which was then called the U.S. Customs Service, was a leader in the fight to protect our children. That is still true today. As recently as 2009, ICE was responsible for 52% of cases prosecuted for receipt or distribution of child pornography, and 90% of cases prosecuted for child sex tourism. This is in addition to hundreds of arrests every year and thousands of children rescued to date. Their efforts are second to none, and I know they will put these resources to good use. But for every child rescued, hundreds more remain trapped in a current of abuse, the horrors of which none of us can truly imagine. And we need the absolute best personnel going into the fight to rescue these children. That's why it's my hope that some of these funds will be used to employ our wounded warriors, in addition to the experienced agents already fighting these battles. Our armed services have already protected us abroad, so naturally, our veterans are a perfect choice to protect our most precious resources here at home. In fact, retired Army Master Sergeant Rich Robertson is already fighting a child exploitation at the ICE field office in Tennessee. In his words, who better to hunt child predators than someone who's already hunted men? I'm enthusiastic about this initiative because I know that the immense skills and motivation of returning servicemen and women possess could be the key to our most successful affront on child exploitation yet. Child predators won't stand a chance. By harnessing the abilities of our wounded warriors, we not only ensure that their skills, dedication, and drive are put to good use back at home, we give them the most dignified thank you of all, a job that truly makes a difference. So let me be clear, with the passage of this amendment, we would be putting predators on notice. Their reign of terror is coming to an end. You can bet on it. I urge all of my colleagues to join me in committing to fight until every American child can live free from terror and exploitation, and support this important amendment, which, Mr. Chairman, I have at the desk, which I should have started with. So thank you very much. And I want to also add, Mr. Chairman, that I support my colleague from California's amendment to increase the funds available to ICE for the purpose of fighting child exploitation by reducing the funds available for immigration detention and removal operations, which in this bill is unnecessarily increased above the President's request. And I thank the Chairman and my colleagues' indulgence for doing this backwards.
Gentlelady yields back. I'm sorry.
No, Mr. Chairman, I would be happy to yield to the gentleman.
Suspend. Would anyone suspend? Gentlelady yields back. Would the clerk designate the amendment?
Offered by Ms. Wasserman Schultz of Florida.
Okay, the amendment now is formally before us. Gentleman from Alabama. For what purpose?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we would gladly accept the gentlelady's amendment.
Thank you.
Further discussion? If not, the question is on the amendment offered by the gentlelady from Florida. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the gentlelady from California rises.
I rise to strike the last word and support the amendment offered by my colleague from Florida.
The gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, each year millions of children fall victim to sexual predators. These young victims are left with permanent psychological, physical, and emotional scars. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, also known as ICE, targets and investigates child pornographers, child sex tourists and facilitators, human smugglers and traffickers of minors, criminal aliens convicted of offenses against minors, and those deported for child exploitation offenses who have returned illegally. The Child Exploitation Center is at the forefront of these investigations. Unfortunately, funding for ICE's Child Exploitation Center has decreased over the past 2 years from $16.7 million in 2011 to a proposed $14.7 million in 2013. This amendment bolsters funds for this center by a modest amount, bringing total funding to $20 million, restoring the budget cuts and providing a small additional amount to make additional headway on ending these heinous crimes. I appreciate the gentlelady bringing this issue to our attention, and I support the adoption of this amendment. These dollars will be well spent safeguarding our children worldwide. And I appreciate the chairman accepting the amendment.
Gentlelady yields back. Now we'll try it again. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentlelady from Florida. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to. The clerk.
Strike the last word.
Gentleman from Alabama.
I yield to the gentleman from Texas to talk about an important immigration enforcement program.